Then we come on to these two sections of Plato, which I'm not going to lie, it's like trying to read through treacle. It's really unclear and a bit sticky and unpleasant, because when treacle gets on the surface, it's really hard to clear up and it's gross. I hate this section of Plato. So much I had to read it about 6 times to get my head around it when I first started teaching the sophist stuff. So Plato basically in these two sections is giving an analogy, and there's 2 different analogies. One is about a ship, which is here, and then there is one about a circus master, like an animal trainer, at the bottom. So I'll skip the first bit because it gives you like a really unexciting introduction. So picture a shipmaster in height and strength surpassing all others on the ship, but who is slightly deaf or has similarly impaired vision, whose knowledge of navigation is on par with his sight and hearing. Conceive the sailors to be wrangling with one another for control of the helm, each claiming that it is his right to steer, though he has never learned the art. They are always clustered about the shipmaster, importuning him and sticking at nothing to induce him to turn over the helm to them. Sometimes if they fail and others get his ear, they put the others to death or cast them out from the ship. So eventually they take over from the shipmaster. They take command of the ship, consume its stores, and drinking and feasting, make such a voyage of it as to be expected from such, as in the voyage goes really badly wrong. They praise and celebrate as a navigator, a pilot, a master of shipcraft, the man who is most cunning. They have no suspicions that the true pilot must give his attention to the time of the year, the seasons, the sky, the winds, the stars, and all that pertains to his art, for if he is to be a true ruler of the ship. So then there's a bit of an interruption where there's a bit of a conversation goes on between, I think it's Socrates, it's Socrates speaking, to someone else, and says, questioning it a little bit further. Then Socrates makes the further point, I will explain this, don't worry, for it's not the natural course of things that the pilot should beg the soldiers to be ruled by him, or that the wise men should go to the doors of the rich. The true nature of things is that whether the sick man be rich or poor, he must need to go to the physician, and everyone who needs to be governed to the door of the man who knows how to govern. You will make no mistake in likening our present political rulers to the sort of sailors we are just describing. So if we go back to the description of the ship. So this is essentially Socrates' objection to democracy. So the ship owner is being compared to the Athenian democracy. So the ship owner's in charge, but he's obviously not capable of steering the ship because he's not very strong and he has limited sort of ability in seamanship. So according to Socrates, the seamanship here is representing the knowledge required to run the state. So the guy in charge of the ship doesn't have the knowledge in order to sort of run the ship properly. In other words, whoever's running the democracy hasn't got the knowledge to run the democracy properly. So meanwhile, the crew of the ship behave appallingly. They argue with each other rather than thinking what's best for the ship. They're only interested in satisfying their own selfish desires. So these guys, which are here, are representing the demagogues that were obviously who were within the city. So we're talking about criticisms like Cleon, Alcibiades, Nicias, etc. They dismiss the ship's navigator as a worthless stargazer, even though he's the only one who has the expertise to steer the ship well. Now, if I can find the stargazer bit in here again, because I've forgotten where he is. Stargazer. Why am I singing to you? You don't need to hear me sing. Sorry, I've lost stargazer. Oh, it's in here somewhere. It's down here somewhere. So, so the stargazer represents the educated, in inverted commas, philosopher king. So Socrates basically thought that only the most educated people should be in charge of everything. So he called these philosopher kings. And that's because these guys were the closest to truly understanding how the world worked, because they questioned everything, because they were philosophers. So this is his criticism of the democracy, that essentially there are idiots in charge who don't really know what they're doing, and then you also have demagogues trying to take over who really don't know what they're doing. And as a result, there's the navigator, sorry. as a result of all of this, everything kind of goes horribly wrong, and the state is falling apart as a result of it. Which I guess he's kind of right. I mean, things weren't great under Cleon and other people. But the idea that only this truly educated really know what they're doing is a little bit elitist, in my personal opinion. But, you know, that's just me being a lefty, I guess. So anyway, we have another analogy, which is about an animal trainer. Okay, so each of these private teachers who work for pay, so these are about sophists. So he's going to be questioning about what sophists are like. It is as if a man were acquiring the knowledge of the humours and desires of a great strong beast, which he had in his keeping, how it is to be approached and touched, and when and by what thing it is the most savage or gentle. And after mastering this knowledge, by living with the creature and by lapse of time, should call it wisdom. But in reality, knowing nothing in reality about which of these opinions and desires is honourable, or base, good or evil, or just or unjust, but should apply all these terms to the judgment of the great beast. And then criticism here, is there any difference between such a one and the man who thinks it is wisdom to have learned how to know the moods and the pleasures of the motley multitude in their assembly? Okay, so he is comparing sophists to an animal trainer who has to basically control a large beast. And in my head it's a lion, but it probably isn't a lion. And the beast is the people. So we can find the beast in here. So this is the people in the assembly. So the trainer learns what the beast likes and doesn't like. So he knows basically how to control it. So as he can now know how to do this, he can in turn teach other people how to do it. And it doesn't think about whether or not what the animal, the people, desire what they desire is good or not. He just does. He simply calls what pleases the animal good and what annoys it bad. So in the same way, speakers in the assembly simply work out what the people want to hear, rather than trying to suggest policies which are truly good for them. So essentially, this section of Plato is really useful to tie into your demagogue section, because it is a criticism not only of sophists but of demagogues. Because obviously Aristophanes in Knights does use that kind of line, always cook something savoury that pleases them, to say whatever keeps people happy and you can control them. And that's basically what this part of Plato is making, exactly the same point, but in a really flowery way, using this really annoying analogy. And that is it for the sources at this particular point on sophists. And you look in the source book, you'll notice the sophist section is significantly longer than this video. Because of that, I'm breaking it down into different sources in particular to make it a little bit more easy to understand, and it really relates to different parts of the sophist's question. I find him a little bit irritating, to be honest. But anyway, again, we needed some sources that just kind of show what Socrates is trying to achieve and his aims and his writings and all that jazz. So that's why I have included these particular sources. So again, we have Plato, who was a student of Socrates, and sort of talks about how wonderful he is here, and he's sort of talking to lots of people, and he's a wonderful guy. However, he does point out that he was attracting the ridicule of people with no knowledge or sense. So essentially, because Socrates is going around questioning everything, people didn't really understand what he's trying to achieve. And as a result of that, people took the mick out of him because they didn't understand him, which is true. And then he said, if you actually read his ideas, you'll see they contain numerous images of virtue, covering the widest possible range, including every subject suitable for study by anyone with pretensions to being a gentleman. Whereas Socrates is trying to use questioning to help people sort of understand the world better and understand themselves better and form better arguments. That's all he was ever trying to do. And he thought wisdom and was a virtue, and being virtuous was being wise. So the two things kind of go together, and that's what his whole philosophy is around. So then we have Plato in another section of a source. First quote we've really got that shows what Socrates was doing. So because of the unfamiliarity with the question and answer technique, so that's what Socrates is doing, question and answering technique, they feel they are being gradually led astray by each question. So remember, Socrates is basically trying to get people to justify their thought processes better. So you would say your opinion, then he would ask you why I have that opinion, and then he'd drill down into it. It's called the Socratic questioning technique. teachers use it, it's very irritating, let's be honest. And at the end of the argument, the conclusion is catastrophic and quite the reverse of the starting point. So the whole point is supposed to make you question what you have said in order to create more wisdom. That's why teachers use it. So you might say, oh, I think the sky is green. I'm just picking a stupid example. And like a teacher or Socrates would be like, and why do you think it's green? And then you kind of go on from there. And in the end, the person might kind of go, well, I accept that my original point about the sky being green is not true because blah, 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 blah. And the source says that people feel like they've been kind of trapped into sort of speaking, sort of changing their minds. It's particularly Possoi games, like a kind of version of checkers, I think, or chess, and have nothing else to say. So people don't like being made to feel like they're a fool. And that might be part of the reason why people don't like Socrates. Part of the reason why I don't like him. We then have this other section by Cicero, again talking about Socrates. So ancient philosophy was concerned with numbers and movements and the origins and destinations of everything. So that's what it was like before Socrates. And then Socrates was the first to bring philosophy down to earth. He located it in the cities of men. So it's about trying to make people think about life and morals, what is good and what is bad. So trying to make the point, I will highlight that because that would be really useful. It's going to be a bit wonky. Sorry, excuse my singing. Oh, that's cool. So again, it's just trying to make people wiser, not necessarily win an argument. It's trying to make them think more critically. It's that kind of critical thinking that is really important to life in general. Last set of sources on Socrates, my favourite guy, my pointer back. So again, I have Aristotle. Socrates was concerned with moral virtues, about creating inductive arguments and definitions. Both belong to the root of knowledge. So again, just the idea of making sure your arguments are fully supported, but being wise, being moral. So you get, this is going to be very repetitive, this particular set of sources. Aristotle again talks about Socrates, thought the true objective was understanding virtue. He sought to discover what morality is, what courage is, and what their parts are. So what kind of makes somebody courageous and virtuous? He thought all virtues were forms of knowledge. So if you're a virtuous person, if you think properly, then therefore you are wise and therefore you are a moral person. Xenophon, Socrates said that justice and every other form of virtue is wisdom. So fine and good things are done by wise people, since every just or unwise, fine and good action is virtuous. Justice and every form of wisdom every form of virtue is wisdom. So in order to be wise, you have to be virtuous. In order to be virtuous, you have to be wise. So it kind of goes around like a circle. It's the joy of philosophy. Xenophon again. Socrates often... Oh, sorry, this before I go on to this bit. So these last two sources, I forgot about this, is basically the arguments against why Socrates was being put on trial. So Socrates' trial was about him being blasphemous, for denying gods, for worshipping fake gods, and for corrupting the youth of the nation. Because of reasons, because he's a pain, I guess. But that's not the official reason, don't write that in an essay. So these two Xenophon sources are basically trying to show that he was a religious guy. So Socrates was seen to be sacrificing at home or on the communal state altars. He made no secret use of divination, and he claimed to receive the signs from the deity. So Socrates himself is not an atheist, and he's not worshipping different gods. He was worshipping all the main gods and the state gods and the private gods. So he was just doing what every other Athenian was doing. And then Xenophon makes this point again a little bit later. No one ever knew Socrates do anything or say anything that offended against piety and religion. He even avoided discussing the popular topic of cosmology because he was like, the gods are the gods. I'm not going to question these gods. So hopefully these sources have helped you sort of get some more information about some festivals, particularly these mysteries, the role of women, the sort of growth of rationalism and skepticism in Athens, and then also the Socrates method for getting people to question their beliefs, also their arguments, and creating what he was believing in, which is about virtue and wisdom, and also the fact that actually Socrates was religious despite what his trial was trying to make him out to be.